Welcome back to the fallen tree. I love the sights of nature. That's why I'm building where I am and sharing my experiences with you. So today, I'm going to continue on my journey. I picked up the metal roofing at my local hardware store, and it's time to get this porch under a roof. We've got the porch framed up now. All the rafters are in, purlins are on, got the drip edge on. Next step's going to be the metal roofing that we're going to put on. Got it right here. So let's get started. So the first few pieces were rather easy. Nice square off the building. Then it came to this end, where this little bump out on my building exists. It comes off at a little bit of an angle. Plus, the roofing's got to wrap around the edge just a little bit. So carefully, I take these measurements and we'll transfer them over to a piece of siding and get it cut. For the cuts, I'm using a grinder. Tin snips wouldn't work too well with the corrugation. And they also make a tool for an impact drill. But from what I've read, those don't work very good for the corrugation either, just in the flat spots. So this seemed to be my best choice and what I've used in the past to get it done. Because of the direction I was running it, this one had to run underneath the other piece, but I had to put the other piece on to get my measurements that I needed. But it fit like a glove after carefully measuring it and transferring. So I'm happy. We can get it screwed in and move on to the next piece. Well, the short side's complete. This is what it looks like so far. So it's often debated whether to screw to the flat or to the top of the rib. In this instance, I decided to go to the flat section because it's a more secure fastening point on metal siding. You can also go to the top rib. Either way is acceptable. And I've done both in the past. The important thing is that your screw's straight, not too tight, and not too loose, for your washer to seal properly. As I started on the front portion of the roof, I noticed that my siding wasn't quite square at the ends to my porch roof line. So for this reason, I'm running these pieces long and cutting those in place. Now, as I secure these, I want straight lines for my screws. I want them all to look good if I were to look down them. So I mark the center of my purlins before I do all my screwing. So I want my metal roofing to hang slightly over the drip edge, where I'll then make a small cut so I have a place for my chalk line to hold. Sticking the end of my chalk line into the notch, I can easily snap a line across to keep a straight line and cut that so it follows the roof line of the porch, having a consistent reveal as you look underneath. Since we've got it all cut now, we'll get the end of this one screwed in and this piece will be complete. Well, now we're at the ridge. We need to add a little bit extra support for the roof line here. It gets a little soft in between at these angles where you cut diagonally across the corrugation. So for that, I'm using about a 2x2, a little bit smaller than the 4 inches that I got across the top of the rafter, so you can't necessarily see it from underneath. But we'll be able to screw in the roofing, and it'll be a solid spot, so if we step on it, it doesn't get all squishy. Finally, we've got all the roofing on. Now it's time for the trim pieces. First thing we're going to do is add this ridge. So it's important as you add these trim pieces, you add them so as the water flows, one piece is over top of the other, and everything flows downhill. The first thing I'm going to do is this ridge cap here. And I'm going to mark the edge of where I want the ridge cap to be. Out from center, and then half the distance of the ridge cap. It's a nice straight line that follows the ridge of the roof. Next, we'll be cutting this piece of ridge cap. For this, I'll be using just a pair of plain tin snips. It cuts pretty easy. And at the end, I make it just a little bit long. Enough that I can make a couple cuts and bend it downwards so I can't see underneath the ridge cap as I'm looking at it. It just creates a more finished look. So as we all know, water normally runs downhill. But where I'm at, I've got the snow and the blowing to deal with as well. So I'm going to use a little bit of extra precaution on this ridge cap. And I've got some 1-inch expandable foam tape that I'm going to stick to the underside of this ridge cap. So when I stick it on, the snow can't blow underneath and rot out my rafter. I was able to find this at my local hardware store over by the weather strippings. It was a little tough to find one that was 1 inch thick. Most of them were about 3/8. But with a little bit of research, I found just the right one. So I'll screw down this ridge cap at the top of every ridge. As you can see, there's a big gap at the bottom. I'll take care of that later. I don't think I got it on camera. But if you look carefully at what I've done later, you'll see that it's bent down and kind of conceals that hole a little bit. As I looked over on the pond, I could see my 2 grass carp. Next, we'll be up by the gable end of the building. For this, I'm using another weather seal strip. This is called an outside closure strip. It's specially designed for the metal roofing. It follows the contours of it and comes in about 3-foot pieces. This will be placed underneath my dormer edge trimming that I'll be putting on here in a second. Again, this is just to keep the snow from blowing uphill and rotting out anything underneath. So as I put on this dormer edge trim, I caulk the underside of it, and I'm just using roofing nails to hold it in place for the most part. As I carefully place these nails, if you see, I'm placing them at the top edge of this trim piece, because later I'm going to have siding hanging over top of it that will cover it up and create a barrier over it so water can't go into the nail hole. Now I do see a little gap there, and for that I'm going to use one of my roofing nails with the washer to seal it up. I still think my siding will cover that, but a little bit of precaution never hurt anything. And I'm also going to use a little bit of sealant up that edge. So it was important that as I picked a sealant for this trim, that I got something that was flexible, due to the fact that your metal and your trim pieces and your roofing are going to expand and contract with the heat and the cooling of the seasons. As I continue and put on the final pieces, I use the same techniques as I've been using earlier on. And finally, it's done. As you can see, all the trim pieces overlap one another. So as the rain falls, it creates a constant barrier. And if you look closely, you can see I've got the end of that bent down a little bit. So now you can't see that gap on the ridge line. But there's a storm moving in, and it looks like I get done just in time. It's just a matter of minutes here until it starts raining. Well, here's a quick walk around of what the final product looks like. All framed up, trimmed, metals on. Take a look from the underside. This is what it looks like from the underside. I think for the most part, I'm going to leave it that way. I will put on a few trim pieces just to hide the joist hangers eventually. But this is what I think the rustic cabin should look like. A little bit of concrete, siding on the walls, and I think that front portion will be done. But that's for another journey. Well, I got done with the roof just in time as the storm rolled in. It's going to be a perfect time to check, make sure that all my washers are seated and I don't have any leaks in the roof. So I'll see you next time on my next project of our journey here. And if you liked it, click subscribe, like, share. And I hope to see you as I continue my journey building the man cave. Thanks for watching, guys.